Hi everyone, this is just a short demo to show how to set up a cross-reference from one Google Sheet to another Google Sheet where the other Google Sheet is the SDE in Google Sheet form as described in the blog post. So to demo this, what I have set up is a Google Sheet that will pull in all of the assets for a character that I've got the API key and vcode and character ID here, and I've written a simple Google Apps script to pull this in. So I'm going to pull in the quantity and the type ID, and then I'm going to show how to type a formula in that will pull up the type name for each type ID by cross-referencing the inventory types table in the SDE in a Google Sheet. Okay, so the script, there's a Google Apps script in the background that I've set up to run this. If you grab the link to this demo sheet, you can see the code. The code is not really important here. It does use an Eve XML API library I wrote in Google Apps Script, which is also available on the EveKit site if you want to try it out. But mainly here I just wrote it so I had an easy way to get all the assets together. So with this information, if I run the function I added here, then what it should do in a second here is pull in all of my assets. I've flattened it so there's no container relationship here, and I've copied the quantity and the type ID. And what I want to do now is for each of these type IDs and look up the type name and record it here. So to do that, we're going to use the query in import range functions, and the other thing we need is a link to the SDE Google Sheet. And so as I mentioned in the blog post, you can use the links that are in the post itself, or you can also look up the link by going to the sheet. And you have to be a little careful because there's two types of links. There's a Drive link and a Google Docs link, and you want the latter. So if we go to the SDE sheet here, this is it. If you're in this view, if you look in the browser address bar, that's the link that you want to actually use here. And if you're still confused, I also add a menu here and a function that you can call. If you call that, it will pop up the link that you want. So this is the actual link. You don't need the edit bit here. You just need these parts here. So this is what you actually need to do the cross-reference. So let's go ahead and save that. So I've just copied that. And then back to our demo sheet here, I left a space for it so that I can save it, and I'll show you where I use that in a second. Okay, so now to actually look up a type ID, first we're going to use the import range function to bring in the inventory types table, and then I'm going to wrap that with a query to look up type IDs and pull out the type of name for each of those type IDs. So the table I want to pull in, it's the inventory types table. Let's go back to the SDE for just a second. I happen to have it up here. Let's see, yeah, I've got it up here. So this is what the table actually looks like. Type ID, this column is what I'm going to use to look up, and then type name is what I'm going to pull out. So the range that I need to pull over is essentially this, A through C, and all the columns here. I think there's about 25,000 odd columns. I don't remember exactly. You don't have to be exact. You can estimate, and so that's what I'll do here. So I'll pull in A through C, and let's say the first 65,000 rows or whatever. Okay, so the first step here is to write the import. So we use import range. The first argument is, they call it the spreadsheet key. What that actually is the link here to the other sheet. And since I'm going to copy this formula, I'm going to use an absolute reference here rather than a relative reference. So the key here is actually in cell B4. And then the range I'm going to pull in, so I'm going to pull in, the inventory types sheet, and then range A1 through C65,000. So that should pull in the whole inventory types table. Now, if I leave this like it is and hit return, it's going to literally copy that entire range and dump it into my sheet here, and that's not really what I want. What I want to do now is just query this range and pull out the type ID and type name that I want. So we'll wrap this with a query. And the first part of the query is the data, the actual range. And so in this case, it's an imported range, so that's done. The actual query, we're going to select the third column. I'll explain this column notation in a second, where the first column, which is the type ID, equals my type ID. And so I need to pull in that cell, which is this guy here. And just to be on the safe side, if there's some problem in the data where it's not clean data, there might be multiple entries with the same type ID, I'll put a limit of 1. So I'll only get the first entry. And then the last argument to query is optional. What you can do is you can tell query to pull in one or more header lines from your remote sheet if you want to copy the headers over for some reason. We don't here. So I'm just going to say false. And that's it. That's the whole query. So now this notation here where I use column 3 and column 1 instead of, if you go back to the other column here, it's actually column A and column C. So the reason for that, and they don't really explain this in the documentation very well, is when you're querying over a data range that comes from a remote sheet, then they don't pull over the actual names of the columns. They rename them literally column 1 through column 2, 3, and so on. So you only have to use this particular notation when you're importing from a remote range. If the actual data range we queried over was within this sheet, then you would use the real column names here. So that's why we've got that bit. And so if I hit return now, it's going to show a bad value here. And that's actually because it was loading the data. And so it showed you, sorry, let's go here and show you the query. So it was working on loading this in the background. And while it was loading that, it had a garbage range and it was trying to do the select over that. And that's why it showed an error. But once it finishes, it actually pulls in the correct value. So in this case, this type is a cormorant. And so that's basically it. What you can do from here is, you can, if you want to get the rest of these, you can, of course, just copy it and paste it in. And then if you see this over here, it's going to go real fast. So that was basically showing it loading the range. And then it does some caching, so it goes a little bit faster. It doesn't, if you reevaluate it, it uses the cached range. But anyway, I just copied the formula literally for all of these cells and pulled in the types. So that's it for the basics. If you want, you can stop watching now. I'm going to do something a little bit more advanced, so stick around. So this example is a little contrived because I used a nice script to automatically generate my assets, and then I went and hand typed this formula in for each of the cells, and so that's kind of a pain. If you were building a report like this, you'd sort of want to automatically copy the formula in here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To do that, you have to go to the actual script itself that generates this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the script so that in the type name, it automatically populates the formula here. And so that's pretty easy to do. I'll just copy out the formula and go to the script. So you can read this at your leisure, but the important part is right here. This is where I actually store the quantity and type values. And so what I need to do now is, for the same row, in the third column, set the formula to our import. And then everything is fine here except for the reference to the cell. So this needs to be whatever the current row is. And that should be that. And so now, if I rerun the demo, it's going to automatically populate the formula here. So let's go ahead and do that. And then again, you can see it's for all of my assets, it's importing the range. So this will take a few seconds to do. And then once it's doing that, all the queries will run and you'll basically be done. I mentioned in the blog as well, if you're only doing one table all the time, this is a little bit wasteful because of the extra I/O. So you're better off just doing a one-time import of just the table that you need. somewhere in your sheet. Okay, there, it finally finished. But if you're doing lots of cross-referencing, like if you're trying to do a pretty complicated industry plan or something, you might find it easier just to pull in, from one sheet where the SDE is. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.